want to show you something, just one or two scriptures that are interesting. In Luke, in the days of Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah of the division of Abijah. Now, here's the funny thing. In the days of Herod, king of Judea. So Herod's obviously, we know now, been made the so-called king. The interesting thing is that the people would have known that Herod has married a Hasmonean daughter for the sake of pulling up into the situation. What they'd also realize is that the Hasmoneans, love them or hate them, have combined the office of the priest and the king. And yeah, in verse 5, Luke, choosing his words, I think politically, intentionally, manages to talk about the king of Judea, Herod, and then the priest of the division of Abijah. Because here's the thing, the Hasmoneans were running on their own schedule and they weren't sticking to Torah law anymore. The situation had gotten out of control. So what's Luke effectively doing? And again, it's a political thing. He's trying to show the rightful people that need to be sitting as the priests, because that's the whole story of the Hasmoneans, is they were these group of priests who, stood up in at the right time in the right way, but through their descendants, it just got out of control and caused this big bugger up, really. And the irony of it is the big mess up leads to Herod being king in Judea. So Luke is running a campaign as politically as anyone else when he talks in this way. And he obviously goes further and says more. We know that Gabriel ends up meeting with Zechariah and Elizabeth. And that is interesting because who can tell me who else does Gabriel go and speak to, um, that then creates connection between further back history?
Mary.
Yeah, but okay, besides Mary, John, go back for me. Who's the other very, very important character that Gabriel speaks to years prior to that?
Daniel.
Daniel. He
Uh,
goes to Daniel. Now, here's why that's interesting. It's Daniel that predicts Hanukkah. Daniel will predict Alexander the Great coming in. Daniel will predict how Alexander the Great's kingdom will be divided. Daniel will predict Greece coming. Daniel will predict Rome coming. And in predicting Greece, Daniel effectively predicts the story of Hanukkah, Antiochus Epiphanes. He predicts all of that. And he gets that information in the process of also talking to Gabriel. And yeah, you've got now, again, Luke knows that Jews would know this. Now you got the same guy that unlocked all of that information about Hanukkah coming. Gabriel comes now to this priest, a rightful priest in the right way. Can everyone see this political agenda that even Luke is pushing? Everyone knows, well, Jews would know. You're talking Gabriel, that's the guy that spoke to Daniel. And then it gets even more interesting because don't forget, we're going to talk about the Parthians still again. We're going to come back to them again sooner as we move through this. So this whole Asmonean story, king and priest combination, not a good thing, not supposed to happen. It gets carried away. Now we're in the first century, and the rolled out effect of this has led to a non-Jew sitting on a Jewish throne, after or especially trying to strengthen that case by marrying into the Hasmonean dynasty, but then also slaughtering the Hasmonean dynasty to create his own. And then yeah, you got Zechariah having John who is a rightful priest, who and his father too. And then John ends up going and pretty much joining their scenes, which is a very strong political party at the time. The mess is not ending. You just can't get to the bottom of this mess. Okay, so not so fast, Rome. Beware of the Parthians. Let's take a quick glance at what we know about the Parthians here. Sorry, I'm just going to see. I can't see my writing here because the top of the screen is there. Okay, Rome was not the undisputed master of the Near East. The empire of Parthia, let me just get this back on, straight from modern Afghanistan through Iran to the Euphrates River. Um, Sorry, guys, I'm just trying to read what it says because I can't see beyond that because I've got this stuff on the screen. From the Euphrates River in Iraq, encompassing territories once ruled by Persian kings and then by Alexander the Great and his successors. Let's go further now. In 53 BCE, the famed Crassus led Roman legions into Parthian Empire only to see his troops massacred and to die violently himself near Carrhae. Later, between 40 and 39 BC, the Parthian king Orodes II conquered and controlled the Roman Near East, including Israel, until Mark Antony organized a counteroffensive that drove his forces from the region. But for the Romans, the damage was done. Henceforth, no one would see the Romans as invincible, and their control of the Near East certain. And that proves how the Parthians became a threat to Rome. Now, here we drop into Herod again. Herod faced this volatile situation and exploited it to his advantage. Indeed, it was no coincidence that the Romans entrusted the throne of Judea to Herod the Great at the close of 40 BCE, the same year of the Parthian conquest. During the campaign, the Parthians installed Antigonus, son of Aristobulus II and scion of the Hasmonean dynasty, as king of Judea. Herod fled to Rome to use this event to make a bid for kingship. He sought out Antony and underscored the Parthian threat and threw in a bribe for good measure. Now, Antigonus was one of the Hasmoneans. Now, this is why I said there's this fight between the two sets. At the same time that the Parthians put that brother in, that Hasmonean in, you've got Rome, who has beaten up one of the other brothers and taken him hostage because these two are fighting against each other. The one sides with the Parthians, the other brother sides with Rome. Can you see the complex mess up here again? And this is between two brothers of Hasmonean heritage. Okay, as the ancient sources make clear, the strategy worked. The Parthian actions motivated the Senate, that's of Rome, to make Herod the, the great king. Now remember, this is at the time when Herod is now having to sit in Rome because the Parthians are um, in Jerusalem at this point. In this situation, Herod is best seen as a manipulator of Rome's confrontation with Parthia for his own advantage. The point here is not Herod in this case. The point here is for me to show you that the Parthians were an equal to Rome in terms of being able to pack a punch, which is why Herod had to be careful with them, which is why he sides obviously with Rome so strongly. Now let's look at this. Matthew 2, verse 1 and 2. Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, the wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. Now, this is obviously politically heavily loaded. These Parthians, remember the wise men were from Parthia, Persian, Babylonian ancestry. They are the ones, now they weren't kings, they were political leaders. They were priests, they were hereditary priesthood, which means they were the official priests of the Persian Empire that were leading into the Parthian Empire. They were astrologers. They interpreted dreams, and obviously looked at the stars too. They were very well respected. They were political analysts. They were political inaugurators. That's what they did too. They inaugurated kings. So they are coming as representatives from the Parthian Empire, and yeah, they come to to Herod. Now remember, Herod's got a history with not maybe these wise men, but with the Parthians. Remember, I told you the Parthians tried to take Herod and try to ambush him effectively and kidnap him, but he was smart enough in his nervousness not to fall for it and join that meeting. So this is the backstory. That's the backstory I was telling you. It's for this. Again, as we note, and is worth noting, Herod was a madman, a very powerful man. Why didn't he have these guys killed? The reason is obvious. They were too powerful. Definitely weren't just three of them, and they definitely didn't come without armed guards. So this is a highly complex situation, and they are yet to say, hey, we totally reject that Rome has put you as the king. We know the king has been born, and we'd like to know where to find him. I mean, you can't get more aggressively, outrightly insulting than that. And the interesting thing is, what does Herod end up saying to them? He entertains them, and he even asks them to tell him where they find Jesus. So that means he's playing the political game again, but it also tells you that Herod was nervous about these guys. So Herod wasn't invincible, and clearly he didn't feel as confident in Rome alone to take on the Parthians at this point. So that tells you again the deep complexity of what's going on here. Now, the thing I want to drop in at this point, it is tradition. You can take this or leave this. We know for a fact that Daniel, let's go back to Daniel. Daniel becomes the Rab Mag. That is the head of the wise men, the Magi in Babylon when he was there. So these guys were literally descendants from the school that Daniel gets put in charge of. Now, tradition, I believe quite possibly true, suggests that it could be possible that the gifts the wise men brought, the Magi brought to Jesus, were actually Daniel's. And that Daniel had said, when you see these signs in the sky, when you see this, you know that a king has been born in Jerusalem and he'll be Messiah and he'll end up ruling over the whole world, that you should take these gifts among. That's tradition. I can't tell you it's absolutely true. I find it intriguing. I tend to like the story. I tend to therefore teach it. I think it gives incredible credence to the story and how it plays out, and why we even get told what gifts are brought at this point to Jesus by the wise men, by the Magi. And again, for me, it just strengthens the case of Gabriel speaking to Daniel, and then Gabriel coming and speaking to Zechariah and saying, hey, look, your son is kind of going to be a forerunner to this Messiah that's coming. And it's so beautiful because it's Gabriel that speaks to Daniel, and now Gabriel comes and speaks to John, and to Zechariah, and John, of course, becomes like part of the prophetic rollout of Messiah to come. So I just think that's interesting and worth noting in terms of that story. Now I want to take you back again in looking again at Herod's story, because you've read the nativity story, you know that story, but this gives you more context. So I'm taking you back to where we had started with the story, to say that the Parthians sent a cupbearer to suggest a truce with Herod. Herod obviously gets nervous, doesn't trust it. He doesn't go. The other counterparts that did go end up getting arrested by the Parthians. Herod's scared. Even though he's got Rome, he's scared. So he hides at Masada and then Petra before going to Rome. He gets, obviously, his loyalty to Mark Antony and Octavius leads to the promotion of kingship. This is while he's away. So now again, remember, he's been made king while he's not sitting there because the Parthians are in charge. Then let's say if this was around 37 BC, I think I said it was, or 38 BC, we've jumped forward 34 years. Jump forward from this, he's made king of the Jews outside of Jerusalem because it's not safe to be in Jerusalem. So he's made king of the Jews outside by one of the tug of war empires, Rome. Now, 34 years later, sitting with the title King of the Jews, what happens to him? The people that forced him to be made king outside of Jerusalem have now sent an entourage and are asking for who? The King of the Jews that was born. I hope you can see the complex political situation again. That was the point. That is the point of tonight's session. 39 BC again, as I said, Herod marches into the Galilee, takes over there first again, and then of course he ends up taking over Jerusalem. But now these same Parthians at around about, like, you know, let's call it 6, 7 BC, around there, are coming in and making Herod very nervous. And Herod was right to be nervous at this point. So this for me is a sprint through a very large part of history We're calling it the um, history of Chanukkah, but I've touched on Daniel because we have to go as far back as Daniel to his prediction about Hanukkah and what would be coming, Daniel's own positioning in Babylon, the flow from Babylon that ends up moving into the Persian and Parthian situation that develops, while Greece and Rome is going to end up taking over part of the Middle East as well. This whole development, if you think about it, Daniel's whole story is a political story in itself. Him getting to be the head of the Magi, then these Magi from Babylon moving through to Parthia end up coming to wanting to see the king born in Jerusalem. There's nothing in any of the story that's not political. And this was the point of why I said we can't just have a gospel that's focusing on the cross, as beautiful as that cross happens to be and what it did. There's a wider story here. And what I'm thinking to do for next week, and to get your thoughts on this, is to turn a little bit more to the Asmonean dynasty directly now and take a snapshot of that progression that we just very subtext, like in the background, looked at. Yeah. Notice, as I said to you, we weren't going to talk a lot about Jesus directly, and we didn't. But I'm hoping to you in the comments now, if you see the value in what we've done, which sounds strange, we didn't talk much about Jesus. But in a way, I'm hoping I'm going to hear some of you tell me, I hope you're going to tell me, my word, but this actually fills in a lot more for us to now go back and read and understand that really Jesus' first century experience is governed by everything that's happened since 164 BC, where the Asmonean story starts, through Hanukkah happening, running all the way down, splintering off into the Parthian story, into the degradation of the Asmonean dynasty that then opens the door to Herod, and then like to say, okay, so this makes sense. Now I understand why there's an Essene community. Now I understand why there's a Pharisaical community. Now I understand why there's a Sadducean community. Because all of these things are all interlinked. That's what I'm hoping you can see, that Hanukkah relates to this, that Herod gets his position because of Hanukkah ultimately, but then also because of the corruption of it, his father's smart maneuvering, before him, Antipater's smart maneuvering that gets him into position. Maybe we can focus a little bit on Herod's father next week too, because that will be more in line with the story of the Asmoneans. And then maybe next week we'd be looking a little bit more deeper into the gospel and starting to build a case of, okay, this is why Jesus did this. This is why Jesus said that, and that's why this happens here and there. Um, you got to see with Herod's family tree how they interlinked, and through their crazy situations that's going on there in the between, like we said, maybe look, some incest there and adultery and who knows what else going on. All of that intertwines with the gospel in a way that you can't separate them. I mean, Paul and Peter, James, they all end up being dealt with through these people that are either linked to the Asmoneans or linked to Herod and what Herod was doing and the corruption going on there. You can't separate these situations from each other, I guess, is the point that I'm getting at with this. So I know tonight wasn't, I've done this before for Hanukkah where the teaching hasn't been particularly inspiring. It's been a history lesson, but I think it's necessary. I think we need these sessions to fill in this information because it doesn't get given in the mainstream story. And the point is, if we get this right, you're going to gain a much better appreciation of the political situation and atmosphere in the Gospels, which is so important for us to get a picture of, and even into Acts to understand why Paul would maneuver and play the games he's playing and the people Paul stands in front of and who he has to make appeal to, yeah, and do this and that and wait for this. All of this is political. There's nothing about it that wasn't political. And that's the point, is that Messiah is a political situation. The idea of Messiah is a political story all in and of itself as well.